Okay, so as you will see from our programme, what we're trying to do is take you on a bit of a journey in terms of all of the things that's been happening in the world of pharmacy technicians. So some of this might be new, some of it might not be new and might just be fresh updates. So just bear with. And as I say, what we will do at the end of the sessions is we will capture any questions. Is that okay? So we're not going to take questions at each presentation, we'll do it at the end. So what we'll start off with is what's quite essential. It's our kind of pharmacy technician qualification. And I'm presenting this to you in terms of my, within my kind of previous role within Health Education England. So I was lucky enough to be the national project lead, along with Ellen Williams, to lead the development of the qualification. So I'm not going to dwell too much in terms of the history, because many of you have heard this in very different arenas and different forums. We did quite a lot through branches, etc. And hopefully you would all have attended some kind of regional event during the last kind of year or so. But the key thing that we want to emphasise through the development of this project is that it was all about ensuring that pharmacy technicians have the right skills and the right knowledge at the right time. And that's quite challenging when you think about all of the diverse roles that pharmacy technicians work in. So all of us in the room have probably gone through very different kind of education pathways to get to whatever role we're doing now. So there was something about we needed to have a core set of standards to enable us to really understand what a day one pharmacy technician role is, and then we start to build on that. And there were some challenges around the system around making sure that we train enough pharmacy technicians, and some of those challenges are barriers because of the current two qualification entry route. That some sectors are unable to deliver that because of the mandatory requirements that sit within the current structure. So I think the key thing was around the drive behind the whole project was around us making sure that we were able to open up the opportunity to train pharmacy technicians in the workforce. So just a couple of key principles in terms of the project there for you. The main driver, of course, was the initial education and training standards review that was led by the General Pharmaceutical Council. So the council signed off those standards in 2017. So what that means is that now is the approved route in terms of qualifications must deliver against those IETs to enable people to go onto the register, as well as some other registration requirements. So things like number of hours in practice, being fit to practice, etc., that sit around that. So if you want to know anything more in terms of those IETs, then the GPHC is a really good place to start. So once the initial education and training standards are signed off, that means that you then have an opportunity to reflect on the qualification structures. And the current qualifications did not map to those new IETs, so what's currently in the system. There were some key gaps which I'm sure you could all feed back to me very easily in terms of things that we see our modern day registrant needing to deliver safe and effective services for patients. So some of those things around professionalism, around ethical decision making, etc., they were all kind of gaps that were within the current model. So this really focuses on building some core knowledge and skills. The other thing within the IET was that it was very clear that it was about core knowledge and skills. Now I see this as a really good opportunity, because once you have a real set of what's core, instead of all the differentiation that we get, so we all know in practice that if you train in community pharmacy, you may have a different educational experience in terms of what your support is, your infrastructure is, and what your achievement is, versus perhaps if you're within a trust, or whether you're in within a CCG who historically would struggle to train a PT, but actually recruits pharmacy technicians later down the road. So there's something about understanding that the whole mechanism around this is opening up the system so that everybody has that core training and enables us to deliver in a much more flexible way what's required across sectors in terms of practice. So some key dates here with you, and some of this we have is in the public domain, but to share with you in terms of the timescales, that's the key thing. So I'm not going to go through this line by line, you'll be pleased to know, but you will have known there was public consultation, that's been out, all of that was reviewed. I will hand over to Ellen in a minute, who will give you an update on some of that key pieces of feedback, because so some of you are probably sitting thinking, I responded to the consultation, not heard anything really since that. So we can give you some information on that, particularly in areas like technical services and what we've done to make sure that we don't cut off a workforce potentially, but we reflect on what those requirements are. We had a bit of slippage time, as anybody who's led a project knows that you always have the slippage time with the best of intentions. And that slippage time was that we were absolutely trying to align the development of the qualification with the trailblazer work in terms of the apprenticeship. So because that kind of waylaid a little bit, we got held up a little bit. But what we've done now is the qualification will be submitted to the GPHC in a matter of days. We have a date for that. And we've done our piece of work with all of the awarding organisations who've contributed to the delivery of that. And they have been very clear that the new qualification will be ready in the system for February. Now, this has caused a bit of anxiety in the system, which I can understand. But what I would ask people to do is just reflect back and think that this is the most significant change within pharmacy technician education for a long, long time, certainly longer than I can remember. Even in terms of MVQ refreshes, etc. This is a completely different qualification. It is a new model. Although we historically may have times that we like to recruit and start courses, they're not set in stone anywhere. There's no requirement that all of our trainees have an induction in August and they start in September. Although ideally, we know that there are some providers with these awarding organisations who may be able to get their qualifications out into the system earlier. What I would say is a key message, if anything, to take back from this is that even if the qualification isn't ready within your area of practice or for your trainees for February, what it will mean is that 2-year programme will enable them to attend one qualification, and they will come out with the knowledge and skills to be able to support them to meet the IET. So the key drivers in the IET were around increased medicines optimisation, skills and knowledge, and also to be able to be almost ready to perform a final accuracy check. So the delay of 3 or 4 months in starting that means that somebody will be ready in the system within 2 years from starting. If we go down the route of continuing with the current qualification, it would take 3 years minimum to train somebody with those standards. So there are some key strategic conversations on, certainly with my HEE hat on, that we're having, particularly within the regions, to say, OK, it's not ready for September, but that doesn't mean just default to the old. And actually, what our awarding organisations and providers are telling us is that they don't want to run another cohort of the old. And why would you want to invest in running an old cohort? But we respect the challenges. So again, go back and have a chat with your education leads, brief them on that. There's information that comes out locally through regional groups, but those conversations are starting to happen on the ground. We won't have a fallow situation, obviously, in terms of those people that are on current programmes. It's OK. They'll just continue, so just alleviate any of those concerns. That's a very busy slide. Do love a busy slide. I think that's because we were working on this coming out. So I think, again, this is not anything that's new to anybody or shouldn't be in the room. This has all been talked about on numerous occasions. I think it just expresses, really, the process that was undertaken in terms of the robustness of delivering it. Now, there are some people, obviously, I respect, that are in the room that will think it's the best thing ever in terms of growing numbers, and there are other people that it doesn't feel that it meets their needs or their sector of practice. I will just keep referring back to the point that we are not training enough pharmacy technicians. We need to train more pharmacy technicians, and we cannot have people training in silos. We know that the NHS is working cross-sector, where more and more posts are being developed in that way. So we need to have an entry qualification that allows that flexibility. We know that there are certain sectors that have never been able to train pharmacy technicians, but employ them at band 5 and band 6. So we know we have a pipeline and a shortage situation. So we are hopeful that the qualification will become an enabler to increase the opportunities to train. But we recognise that we don't want to be shutting off a pipeline in another area. Here's the big news. So this can be the tweeted out. So here, everybody's been asking about what it's called. And so we can share with you that it is a diploma. It's a diploma in the principles and practice of pharmacy technicians. We wanted the word pharmacy technicians in there to make it really, really clear that this leads to a registrable profession. So this, again, is a big step forward in terms of us as a profession. It is a level 3. We did have, this was developed by awarding organisations. There was, everything was written to meet the initial education and training standards. There were times when I thought potentially it could go to a level 4. But actually the content in terms of the science and everything else, when you map that to other kind of entry-level qualifications, just wasn't enough. So it's gone through and will go through an off-qual process in terms of levelling that. So although I've put the level 3 in brackets there, that has to be finalised by off-qual. They will make that final decision, but it is highly likely that it will be a level 3. And that would reflect in terms of what the work is with the apprenticeship trailblazer as well. I'm going to hand over to Ellen now, because she's going to pick up with you what you've obviously all fed into in terms of consultation responses and next steps.